organizational development and change management consultant. I've spent most of my career in the corporate sector, and then about 4 years ago, I set up my own consulting business. And I've actually started working quite a bit with nonprofit organizations as part of that. So I've developed quite a passion of helping organizations that maybe don't have the resources and the tools and the budgets that corporates do. So quite excited to be here today and to talk to you a little bit about engagement and team development. I'm German. I'm based in the UK, and yeah, I think that's sort of key there. So let me do just a quick little bit of context setting before we do the introductions. So the session today is about driving engagement to build effective teams. And we're going to look at both a little bit of the talent, the different parts of the talent processes, routine processes, people processes, but really do a deep dive more around engagement and what is engagement and why is it important. All right, so I really strongly believe that at the heart of every organization are its people. People are the ones who get the work done, the ones who bring the ideas, who collaborate, who bring their passion, their skills, and their talents to the table that actually enable organizations to succeed and have an impact. However, the way a company treats or an organization treats its people and how the people within an organization treat each other can either have a hugely positive impact on that organization, or it can actually be putting your organization at risk when things don't work out well. So the focus we want to have today is how can we explore what are some of the positive ways in which we can further unlock the potential and the skills and everything that people have to bring, can bring to our organizations. According to Gallup, so Gallup is an organization based here, I think in the UK, they do a lot of work around the globe, and they've been doing research on employee engagement for decades. And their research shows that actually within worldwide, only about 15% of employees, and within the US about 35, significantly higher, but really fall in the engaged category. So if you put that on its head, 85% of employees worldwide are actually not engaged in their job. So what does that mean? So Gallup defines engagement as involvement and enthusiasm of employees in their work and their workplaces. It's the difference between employees who just show up and do the job and go home and do the minimum of what it takes, and engaged employees who are the ones who really bring their whole selves to work, who bring in new ideas, who go above and beyond to support the organization, their colleagues, their customers, their suppliers, their beneficiaries. So if people really are at the heart of your business and what makes your organization thrive, then I think you'd probably rather have the 15% or the 35% who are really engaged rather than the bulk who are not. So that's really at the heart of what we're going to explore today. So we're going to kick off to talk a little bit about why engagement is important. We'll talk about the concept and what are the elements of engagement and how do we sort of break that down, because it's a bit of a fluffy term. How do we build engagement into different parts of the sort of talent cycle, as I call it, or the people processes within your organization? And line managers are going to be really critical as part of that. And we'll also share some tips on how to build engagement with your team members. And I will be looking both at staff and volunteers, because I know a lot of nonprofit organizations, of course, also have quite large volunteer teams, and some really simple things about that you can do on a day-to-day basis. So let's start off with some introductions. We'll do a bit of around the table. I would love for you to share your name, your role, and the organization that you work for, where you're based. And then also, what does engagement mean to you? So feel free to come off mute. I'm happy to go with whoever's happy to volunteer or If not, then I might pick on some.
I can start, Christina. Hi.
Hi, Kateri.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Kateri Salas. I'm working for Transforma at the moment as the Director of Operations. Transforma, it's an organization that works with climate change in terms of advocacy, but also in research. Right now, well, I was born and raised in Costa Rica, but at the moment I'm in Mexico City. So it's the morning in this side of the world. And thank you, first of all, thank you, Christina, for this beautiful introduction. I think it's for us at Transforma, but also at a very personal level. It's going to be very interesting. I'm always very just intrigued by the idea of what people's management entails, right? So I'm really looking forward to learn a lot from this presentation of yours. And for me, engagement, I think what it came to my mind as the very first word was commitment. How can you define commitment, right, as part of your team and your organization?
Yeah,
so
great.
That would be, thanks.
Great words. Thanks, Kateri. Who's next?
Happy to go next, Christina.
Yeah, hi, Anne.
I've lived most of my life in Germany, even though I'm English, so could do this in German as well, but we'll do it in English for today. So my name is Anne Morel, as it says. I'm COO of the Chancery Lane project, which you can see on my banner here. The people who've met me before know that we believe in the power of contracts to effect climate change. A simple concept: if you have green clauses in all the contracts that underpin our society, we'll take a huge step towards realizing our net zero goals. So we draft, in conjunction with the with lawyers, we draft contracts which can be simply lifted, copied from our website and placed into contracts to realize climate change. To fight climate change, I should say. My location is, we are a remote organization. The actual team is mainly in the UK, but in fact, lawyers worldwide are involved in our organization. What does engagement mean to me? On a personal level, it's about doing something I'm passionate about. That feeling of going to work, but it's work, but it's also my passion. Mm-hmm. And it's great when we have people in the team who are also feeling that way. And of course, if you believe in what you're doing, work isn't difficult, I suppose, because you're seeing the impact.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who's next? Alejo, can I invite you to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Alejo, and I'm the communications manager for the Environmental Association of the Argentine Association of Environmental Lawyers. And I am based in Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, but the organization is distributed all along the Argentinian territory and also has some projects that works outside national boundaries. My belief in, what does engagement mean to me is mainly belief, as Anne put it, the belief that you're doing something more, something right, something that is not only your day-to-day job or doesn't have like short-sighted objectives on your personal life, but has long-term fulfillment in your ideology, faith, not in a religious way, but faith in what we believe is right. So I would say that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And a big fan of Argentina. Went there on my honeymoon and absolutely loved it. So wonderful country. Sophia, are you okay to come off mute, Sophia?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe internet a bit slow, yeah.
Sí. Bueno, buenas tardes. Soy Sofía Nemenman. Trabajo con Alejo en la Asociación Argentina de Abogados Ambientalistas. Soy coordinadora general de la asociación. Vivo en Bariloche, en Patagonia. también en Argentina. Y en principio agradecida por el taller, por el encuentro, Cristina, gracias. Y para mí coincido un poco con lo que vienen diciendo. Para mí tiene que ver con el compromiso, o sea, el compromiso, lo que uno puede sostener desde un compromiso como real sentido, digamos, de coincidencia, de compartir, de visión. Me viene algo así.
Thank you. This is where I have to ask, was I supposed to switch to the other channel to hear the interpretation? Patricia, would you mind just popping in? I understood, I've got a bit of Spanish, but just so I get the wording right on what engagement means to Sophia, just so I can capture, if you could pop it in chat, that would be great. Oh, okay, hold on.
Me, yes.
Now I can hear you, I think. No, I can't hear you. Yeah, if you can put it in the chat, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm learning. The whole interpretation thing is new for me. A sense of belonging, yes, sense of belonging. And vision, yeah, being connected to the vision. Great, thank you so much for sharing. Did I miss out any?
Yeah, there is Nicole, but I'm not sure the camera is on, so it's not clear whether she's with us or not.
Hola, Patricia. Pasa que llegué tarde, entonces no sé de qué estaban hablando, como que estoy perdida. ¿Ya? Ajá. Ok. Voy a poner la cámara entonces. Hola a todos. Mi nombre es Nicole Álvarez. Ya he participado en otros talleres. Mi rol en la organización es... bueno, trabajo en una organización también de defensa laboral, o sea, defensa ambiental, perdón, legal. Al igual que debe ser muy parecido a los compañeros que trabajan en Argentina, pero yo soy de Chile, de hecho actualmente vivo en Santiago de Chile. ¿Qué es lo el compromiso? A ver, bueno, nosotros la verdad que somos un grupo de puras mujeres que estamos defendiendo una idea o creencias en común y que pueden dañar la vida diaria de tanto el país como el mundo en general. Entonces, en definitiva, estamos como luchando con una misión que tenemos todas y que creemos todas y que tratamos de defender de la forma en que nosotros podemos. Ay, se me olvidó decir que era yo era la coordinadora financiera. Ay, muchas gracias por permitirme estar en el taller.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And thank you, Patricia, for helping with the interpretation. I think there's one more person, Anna, that I think is just in the waiting room. Do we just want to give them a sec to come in? It's a great list, though, and I think we're seeing some sort of common themes. Hola, Christina. Hi, thanks for joining.
Te decía que puede que sea la Cristi, que es mi compañera, la Cristina Lux.
Hi, Christina. We're just doing introductions. Would you be happy to introduce yourself and share what engagement means to you?
Okay, hi everyone. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. What engage means, to me, it's like a compromise. Involves responsibility and respect for the other person that you are engaging with, or the subject you are engaging with.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. And where are you based? What organization are you with?
Sorry?
Where are you located?
I'm in Chile. I work in Defensoría Ambiental, as well as Nicole here.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Did I miss anyone? Has everybody had a chance to share?
Yeah, everybody did.
All right, fantastic. All right, well, let's dive into the topic. So we'll come back to these in a second, and I think there's going to be a lot of common themes that we're going to explore. But you guys are already capturing quite a number of elements of what really makes up engagement. I think the first question is always, why is engagement important? And I think a lot of times I think we have a bit of a gut feeling that if people are engaged, they're going to give more to the organization, they're going to perform better, they're going to feel more connected, they show more commitment, some of the things that you shared. But I know sometimes gut feeling isn't enough. And so I wanted to just share a little bit of research. So, and this is again, research from the Gallup organization that's done a lot of research around what impact does performance really have on organizations. So organizations that are that have high levels of employee engagement see significantly less absenteeism. So people taking time off for sickness, for work, burnout, for various other reasons. They see a much lower rate in safety incidents. So especially if you're maybe in or quality incidents in a factory setting, in a manufacturing environment, but also in a patient setting, for example. So if it's in a care or in a hospital, so I think you really want your hospital staff to be highly engaged. Now, I'm not sure how many of them are 2 years after having lived through COVID, but there's a really, really strong connection there. You can also see, depending on whether your organization already has a lot of turnover in people or not, but the higher the engagement level is, the less turnover you see. And of course, that provides continuity for your organization. That requires you to spend less money recruiting and onboarding and training up new people. It also has impacts on customer satisfaction or customer loyalty, and impacts on productivity, and of course in the corporate sector, that also follows through around profitability. So there are some sort of hard numbers behind the engagement piece, not just, like I said, sort of our gut feeling around that. So what I want to sort of encourage you to do is to just, and again, we don't have to necessarily share this, but if you think about a time when you were in a job where you didn't feel engaged, did you go above and beyond? If your boss asked you to stay late to finish something off, how willing were you to do that? Did you bring your best to work every day? Did you bring in new ideas and think about how you can improve the business? Probably not. You probably stayed only in the business for the paycheck. And when something better came along, you were probably quite tempted to have a look and see whether maybe there's a better job or a better boss or a better organization out there. So a lot of times what keeps us is the financial incentives. Now, I'm generalizing, but a lot of times when we're in the nonprofit sector, salaries aren't as competitive as they are in the corporate world. So financial incentives are going to be potentially even less of a driver for people to stay. And then also, we talk a lot about staff, but actually, in my work with other nonprofits, what I've seen is that engagement among volunteer organizations is even more important because they're not even getting paid. So if you've got a lot of volunteers, again, you also want to think about, what am I doing to keep those people engaged and bring their best and bring their energy on an ongoing basis to help the cause that you're trying to drive. So if you think of a time when you felt engaged in the job, what contributed to your engagement? So you talked earlier about that sense of belonging, the connection to the mission. But what was it that made the difference versus maybe a situation where you weren't engaged? Anyone?
Feeling valued?
Feeling valued, yeah. By anyone in particular?
Your boss?
Your boss, yeah. Any other thoughts?
I would say that some things that contribute to your motivation, for instance, just this idea of the emotional salary, other than just the financial piece, but what other stuff contributes as salary, right? Emotional salary.
Yeah. Do you have an example?
Well,
I love that term.
I guess,
I've never heard the term emotional salary. I love that.
I wasn't sure if it exists in English, but I know that in Spanish we use it. So, so maybe that's actually a question for Anne as well. But, but I would say that when your salary comes along with some sort of benefits, for instance, I don't know, like particular holidays or vacation days or time off, for instance.
Yeah.
That kind of emotional salary, I would say.
Great, thank you. Any other contributors? Any other thoughts?
Creo que también la noción o la percepción de que ciertos cambios reales se logran gracias al trabajo de la organización, digamos, como el entender que particularmente en el mundo de las ONGs y que tienen cierta responsabilidad social y política, sentir que hay cambios o diferencias en la realidad que la ONG está logrando.
Right, so seeing the impact of the work that you're doing. Yeah, all right. So we'll so let's have a look and see. And again, I've grown up in an organization that worked a lot with Gallup and their concept around engagement. And so there are others out there, but for me, that's always really resonated and sort of made sense at a very personal level. So Gallup has what they call the sort of the engagement hierarchy, and a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can see here there is some basic needs that we all have, right? And these are almost the hygiene factors that we need to make sure are sorted first. There is then the level about are we, you know, an engagement and the individual needs that I have as a person. There are needs that I have from a team, from a sense of belonging point of view, where I want to, you know, we as human beings, we most of the time want to belong, whether that's a cause or a team or an organization. And then there's also this piece around growth, right? So as human beings, how are we developing? How are we growing? How are we continuing to thrive? Because we don't necessarily all want to stand still. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So when we talk about the basic needs from an engagement perspective, what's really important for people is to understand what's expected. So when I show up at work, what does my boss, what does the organization expect? What's the work that I'm supposed to be doing? And then the other piece is, do I have the materials and equipment that I need to do my work right? Now, these sound really basic and really simple. What I always found was really interesting. So for example, in the organization that I used to work, we actually were really, we almost had the pyramid upside down. So we provided loads of opportunity for people to grow, but we weren't always very clear with people about what's expected. Now, this could be the expectation around what we do, could also be the expectation around how we do it. How specific are we with people? Do we want to have stuff done in a certain way? And are we actually articulating that? Or are we just leaving people in the dark to figure it out and then tell them they've done it wrong afterwards, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we come to talk about sort of how this fits with performance management and other things. But these are sort of the basic needs and really the stuff that you should make sure that when you're working, when you're managing people, when you're looking to engage others, do they know what's expected? And do they have the materials, the equipment, the systems, the knowledge, whatever it is that they need to get the job done? Or are we making life really, really difficult for them? At the next level is the needs people have at an individual level, right? So when I go to work, do I have the opportunity to actually do what I do best? Can I play to my strengths? Can I contribute meaningfully through the knowledge and the expertise and the skills that I have? Or am I constantly being asked to do things actually that don't play to my strengths, that I'm not very good at, or that I'm not comfortable in? So as a line manager, how are you figuring out what are the skills? How well do you know your people, and how well do you match the people to the jobs? The other really big one, and you guys mentioned it, is this: am I being valued? Am I being recognized? And again, this sounds really simple, but sometimes just telling somebody they've done a good job in a way that is really genuine and that is meaningful. It's not, I've had a boss before who's told me well done every time I've written an email. That doesn't really do it for me either. But when I know I've put hard work into something, am I getting the recognition and the praise for the work that I've done? Am I being valued? Am I being seen? And am I being recognized? There's also the element, and again, we've talked a little bit about this, but does somebody care about me as a person, right? Am I just a number? Am I just somebody who comes in and is expected to get the job done, but people don't really care about me, maybe what goes on in my private life? And again, we might have different levels or degrees to which we want to share some of that, but am I being seen as a person, and do people see me as an individual, and do they value me, and do they care about me? Are they watching on whether am I working too many hours, or when you have a bad day, do people care enough to ask what's going on? And then the last one at the individual level is there somebody who encourages your development, who who can see that there's a potential for you maybe to do more, who encourages you to do more, to do better, to continue to grow, and really achieve your potential. At the next level, this is really where we then talk about the team piece. So, and part of that is, does my opinion count? Do I have a voice in the organization? Am I being seen as an equal, and do people care what I have to say? I think this comes a lot with, we talk a lot at the moment about psychological safety. Do people feel safe to share an opinion, but also when they share it, is anyone listening? And genuinely, again, if we're very highly engaged, we're going to want to bring our ideas, our opinions to the table and help the organization improve. But if nobody cares, if nobody listens, if I'm always being ignored or talked over, that's probably going to impact me over the medium term. I think what's great working in the nonprofit sector is there is such a strong sense of mission and purpose that organizations have. The question is, can I link my job to that? So does the mission and purpose of my organization make me feel like my job is important? And that might be really obvious and easy for some people in certain roles that are directly working with the communities you're trying to impact. But maybe if you're working in accounting or in analytics or at the reception desk of an office, maybe that link isn't always so clear. And so how can you help people be part of that bigger mission, that bigger purpose in any role they have in the organization, and help them show you are making an impact, you're making a difference, you're creating value. There is also then this piece around, we tend to do a lot of collaboration. So are my co-workers committed to doing quality work? Are they in it for the same quality outputs as I am? Or actually, are they, if my colleagues are not doing a great job, if they're sloppy, if they don't finish stuff on time, how is that impacting my work? And I've certainly been in a situation where I felt that other people weren't necessarily pulling their weight. And then I was left in the lurch and was having to do either extra work or more work, or the quality of what I had to deliver or the timing wasn't right. And so again, how well as an organization are we all in it together? And when there is issues, are we actually addressing them? Are we providing feedback? Are we communicating with each other to resolve some of these issues? And then and this is always a very controversial question, the way Gallup frames this in the survey. And it's labeled as, do I have a best friend at work? I think what it really means is there at least one person in the organization that I feel that I can have a really open and honest conversation with? Somebody who I trust that if I have a problem, I can go to them and I can get advice without being judged, or I can get support when I'm struggling. Is there a person like that out there? So it doesn't have to be what you call a best friend. For some people, best friends are people you grew up with when you were 5 years old. Certainly in Germany, that's a lot of times how people interpret that question. I think the concept is more around, do I have somebody in my work context that I can trust and I can go to for support, and I can get potentially also emotional support if I need it. And then the last, I keep clicking this in the wrong way. The last element is then about this growth element, right? This, how do we develop? And so again, we look at, has somebody at work talked to me about my progress? How am I doing? Whether that's if you're new in the job or you've been in the job for a really long time, but as humans, a lot of times we want to see that things are moving and that we can maybe take on more responsibility, or we can get involved in new activities, or maybe with a bigger project. But is somebody having a conversation with me about where I'm going, how I'm moving forward in the organization? And am I being given the opportunities to learn and grow? Can I acquire new skills? Am I being trusted? And learn and grow for me is not just about the opportunity to go on a training, but have I had an opportunity to stretch myself, to maybe push some boundaries, to grow as a person? And that could be from a functional point of view, it could be from an interpersonal point of view of how I interact with people, how I show up. It's a really broad thing, but as humans, it is one of the needs that we have, and one of the things that helps us feel engaged. So because these are the questions, and Gallup runs this as a survey, but I find these also, really great questions just as a conversation and with my team members. And we'll talk a little bit more about what are some of the focus areas you may want to put on different types of conversations you're having, or at different parts of an employee's or a team member's sort of journey. But I find them really interesting and great conversations to have with an individual, to find out more about them, to see maybe where their engagement's a little bit lower, and what is driving that, and what are some of the things that you as a manager or a peer can do to help them feel more engaged. I'm just going to pause here because I've done a lot of talking. Any questions, any thoughts? All good, all good. All right. So what you can see, and what I've already shared is, and I think Anne, you alluded to it, right? Is you called it the boss or the manager, but the manager really plays a really important role in helping people feel engaged and create that work. And while, as you can see here, it's not necessarily the manager's role to find your best friend at work or the person that you trust, but as a manager, am I sensing whether somebody is actually integrated and has got that sort of support network within the business and somebody that they can talk to? And if not, then maybe what's driving that, or is it even a problem? For some people, it might be less of an issue than for others. But so as a manager, I think if you want to drive engagement in your team, how can you start to have some of these conversations? Or how are you sensing, is there a lot of discussion within the team about, I know in my old team, we always had a lot of fuss about systems not doing the right thing and being inefficient and not working and all these. And are these things starting to sort of eat away a little bit at the engagement and causing frustration? And while it's not always the manager's role to solve it, but at least what the manager can do is let's have a conversation and let's see whether maybe somebody else can help and resolve it and raise the issue and create awareness around it and give a voice to both the team and the individual. And I think one thing that I've certainly found true for myself, but that I've seen in others, is people generally don't leave businesses. They leave managers. Right? I think a manager plays such a crucial role in creating the environment where people feel engaged and where they can thrive, that can either, if they do a really good job, it can compensate maybe for the business not being a great place to work. But if you've got a great team, a lot of times you're more likely to stick with the team because of the team and the manager. But if it's a fantastic business but you end up with a less than average boss, again, you may have more of an incentive to look elsewhere because of the impact that they have. So let's have a bit of a look in terms of, because what I call a talent cycle. So as people join businesses and work in businesses, there's various different things that as a manager, or processes that as a manager that I should be involved in. So initially, of course, it's about how do we bring the right people into the organization, right? How do we attract the right talent? How do we select candidates? What are the skills we need? What are we actually hiring for? And then, of course, as part of that, those choices that we make when we do hire is a lot of times we have a really long list of what we're looking for in people, and a very sort of big inventory of skills and experiences and all these sorts of things that they should be bringing with them. But also asking the question, what are the things that they need to bring and what are the things we can teach them, right? Do they really need to know about our sector or have worked in an organization of this type? Or do they really need to be an expert in this space? And what are some of the transferable skills? Once we bring people in, then is how do we integrate them into our organization? How do we help people understand the workings? And again, I from my corporate career, it was always about how do I understand and get my head around all of the systems and all of the processes and all the way things are being done around here. When I've done work with nonprofits, it's more right, how do we get stuff in a process-free zone done at all? Where a lot of times things are a little bit more more agile, a little bit more flexible, and not so process-driven. But no matter what environment it is, how do I help people integrate into that and be effective? And how do we help them speed up and get ready to perform? So get up the learning curve quickly and learn all the things that, despite all the skills they bring, that are very particular to the organization. I think the other big role, of course, that managers play is around performance management. And I think a big part of that is, as a manager, figuring out what does great performance look like for that individual or for that specific role? What is my expectation? And we talked about, one of the key elements of engagement being clear on what's expected. Well, how good are we actually at articulating that? And sometimes we're not, especially when you've got a boss who might have not done your job before, right? They're more of a leader or a manager with a generic skill set. How do you then judge performance and whether people are doing a good job? Do the people have the right skills? I know a lot of times we bring people into a role, we have a really good job description, we're very clear about what they want to do, but hey, we're a small organization and we're going to need some help over here, and can you help us do that as well? And we might push people into spaces where they don't have the skill set or that don't play to their strengths. And so are we really doing a good job at matching that up? Or if that's what needs to happen, how are we going to help those people get the skills that they need in order to be successful? So it's making sure that there is a good match between the person and the role. The other big role, of course, that managers play on an ongoing basis is around this personal development. So that really links on from the skills piece. How do you ensure your employees have the right skills and capabilities, not just for the job you're asking them today, but also tomorrow? As your organization grows or expands, I've done some work recently with a nonprofit that, you know, has been a startup, and they've operated as a startup, but actually now they're a medium-sized organization. They've scaled, and all of a sudden the skills they need in terms of managing people and leading a large organization are very different than the skills they needed to get there. So how do we bring people along? How do we make sure that they're staying current and they're keeping up with the needs of the organization as it changes or grows or U-turns or pivots or whatever those words are these days? And one of the things that I've always talked to my teams is, if you stand still, you're going to fall behind, right? The world moves so fast today. And I think if we even just look at how we work, and I think many of you talked about having remote teams and you're used to this. There's so many people I've talked to over the last 2 years who just weren't used to working remotely and working from home and collaborating in that way and being effective. And so I'm hoping the next pandemic is another 100 years away. But how do we keep up with some of those external factors that are impacting our organizations and the way we want to go? And as you grow as well, when you're starting to bring in different layers of management, when it's not just a flat organization, how do you make sure that your subject matter experts and the people that you might have brought in as lawyers or as accountants or whatever are now able to lead people? It's not a skill set that always comes natural to everyone, and it's a skill set that can be learned. So how are you then investing in helping those people do that successfully? And then lastly, and again, this talks very much to this growth piece, is as a manager, how do you help your employees grow within the organization? And what does a career look like? And I mean, there's a lot of nice sort of graphics that sort of talk about what, you know, how careers have evolved from. I think that especially in the baby boomer generation, it was you join one company and you go up the ladder, and that's a career. And then it became much more of a, well, I work for lots of different companies, and that's a career. And now it's career is anything you want to be, right? But depending on the size of your organization, there's different opportunities. Having a career doesn't mean always having to get a promotion. So you can define that within your organization and have that dialogue again with your people around what is your expectation around career growth? Is it about maybe more responsibility or being able to try different things, or maybe working in a different geography, or with remotely with a different geography, or whatever it is? How do you define career, and how do you meet that sort of growth need that people have? And one of the things I always said to my team as well is, not everybody wants to be the next CEO, and that's okay too. So that is a career choice people can make. And so actually, I want to be an expert in my field, and I want to do that for the rest of my life. But you still need to continue to develop, because maybe regulations change, or the organization changes, or all of these things. So there's still an opportunity to move on and do different things. And having these conversations, I think, is really important in order to help you retain people in the organization as well. Because if you're ignoring it, if you're not having those conversations, they're going to look for their career growth elsewhere. And so I think those sort of 5 areas, and again, the attracting, onboarding piece, the recruiting piece, are probably more for when you're bringing new candidates in. The performance, the development, and the career piece are an ongoing thing, that ongoing conversations that we need to have with our employees. And the engagement thread, so the engagement piece that we talked about earlier, I think really connects all of these. And there's elements that you want to focus on, no matter where you are in the conversation with your employees. So if we bring this all together, when we're attracting, when we're recruiting, things like helping people understand, how are you going to, if you join us, how are you going to be able to contribute to our mission and our purpose? Really understanding what is it that you do best, and what are the skills that you can bring to our organization, but also showing, and here are the opportunities of how you can grow within our organization, are some ways in which you can start to engage people even before they've joined, to make sure, A, there's the right fit, but also to get them excited. Once you're bringing them on board, and this is an interesting one, the organization that I used to work for, was a brilliant business, but there was we always saw a real dip in engagement once people joined. So generally people join a new organization and they're super engaged, super excited to join. And then they get hit with reality. And what we saw, for example, was that if we're not doing a good job with the onboarding to help people really understand what is expected of them, how do they navigate the tools, the resources, where do they find information, how can they really get the job done, how do they navigate either the processes that do or that don't exist, not getting enough time and building that relationship with the manager really early on, to know that there is somebody they can go to for support and so forth, and continuing to connect with the mission and purpose, people's engagement will drop, right? And this is where some organizations see quite high fluctuation within the first 6 months or the first year, where people join and they just don't find their feet in the organization that they join. So I think specifically in the first sort of 30, 60, 90 days, it's really important to not just talk about, here's your job, and just get on with it and letting people swim, but providing that extra support and checking in around, are we both on the same page, expectations, all these sorts of things, to help keep the engagement level up and really benefit from the high level that people automatically have when they join a new business. When it comes to then, once people are more established, performance management, again, is something where you want to check in with expectations. I had an experience recently where, again, a small organization, we hired somebody in for business development. And then it was, oh, well, but we need you to help with this and with that. And all of a sudden, the person had 5 other projects. And what they didn't have was time to do business development. And within 8 months, the organization decided, well, we're going to let that person go because they haven't actually brought any new business in. Well, we never really reset expectations, right? So I think, again, making sure that on an ongoing basis, you're very clear about what the expectation is, what does good look like, providing recognition, making sure that the work that you give the person really matches with their strengths, should provide some stretch as well, but does match their strength. They have an opportunity to input and have their opinion heard, but also checking things around the coworker and do they feel like the team is providing the right input, and are we all working together well? Can all be part of this performance conversation that you have with your team members. And I think the really important thing on these is, of course, I know in a lot of big organizations, we used to have performance processes where we set goals at the beginning of the year, we'll have a mid-year check-in, and then let's review at the end of the year. Doesn't work like that anymore. Things are too dynamic, right? We've got to have these conversations on a much more frequent basis if we really want to avoid disappointment in December. In terms of personal development, again, that directly links to some of the topics around, does my manager encourage my personal development? And are they providing me with opportunities to maybe get some exposure to new areas, to build some skills, to stretch myself? Are they providing me with opportunities to learn and grow? And while I strongly believe I, as an individual, own my career and my personal development, and I've got to drive these, my manager can play a really big role in supporting and enabling and also pushing a little bit and making sure that I don't get too comfortable where I'm at. And then in terms of the career piece, again, the opportunity to learn and grow, having regular conversations about progress can all contribute to employees' engagement and helping people thrive in the workplace. And therefore then pay things back in terms of performance and so forth for your business. I see there's a few. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to catch up. All right. Yeah, and I saw your comment around onboarding. Yeah, absolutely. When you're remote, it's so much easier sometimes when we can just get in a room and sit down and spend some quality time together. Or when you're in an office and you're new and you just have a look. I mean, I grew up in an open plan office, and it was a luxury because there was 300 people around who I could ask for help, or if I didn't know where to find stuff and so forth, not always relying on my manager, and especially when you don't know what you don't know, right? But when you're remote, it's a lot more difficult. And so I think especially during onboarding is how do you make sure you have regular check-ins, and also provide, I think that's providing space just for whatever questions come up. It doesn't always have to be a meeting with a purpose. Sometimes there's stuff that just bubbles, or questions that come up spontaneously. So yeah, so I think in a remote setting, I think that's really important, and sort of, I think shared workspaces, the ability to have easy access to information to people in various different ways, I think also really, really critical. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? So what can managers do? I really believe that every employee deserves to have 3 great ongoing conversations with their manager. One, clearly around performance. In the end, we're employing people with a purpose to do some work and to deliver an outcome or to have an impact. So performance conversations, and like I said, there is space to check in, to calibrate, to prioritize, to adjust and clarify expectations. Performance conversations are also a great place for feedback, both positive and for improvement, if things are not working. And the one thing I always feel really strongly about, for feedback to be timely, there's nothing worse than, oh, last month when you did that. Great, and I've done it 5 times since, thank you. Would have been nice to have the heads up. So, and I think this is where, on the performance side, having really regular check-ins is super beneficial. And also the space for recognition, right? And again, I think on the recognition bit, this is one that I think can be quite individual as well. Exploring what's important to the person. So for me, it's really important that recognition is timely, is genuine, and for something that I've done that's actually meaningful. I like personal recognition, but when the circumstances are right, I also appreciate public recognition. My husband's the opposite. He hates public recognition. He'd rather die than be called out in a town hall. So even having, especially when you've got a new person on board and you don't know, I think having some of these conversations around how do you want to get feedback? How do you want to be recognized? What don't you like? Because you don't want to be doing you don't want to give people public recognition, and it might have actually the sort of the opposite effect. Rather than feeling rewarding, it almost feels like a bit of punishment, having been called out in public. And then the performance conversation for me always really leads nicely into development, right? This is then about what else? How are you continuing to grow? So the feedback piece, especially if there is developmental feedback, is a great basis to then say, okay, well, how do we make sure that you can develop in this space? What support do you need? What initiatives are there for you to maybe practice this new skill? What formal training can we provide? Who's somebody who can maybe provide some coaching and support? A big part of the developmental conversation, and I love having sort of development plans as a tool. So, you know, is there one or two skills that you really focus on in sort of a given time period? And what are some of the things you're going to do to learn about a skill, to practice it? But then with the manager having that space to reflect, okay, well, you know, I've been trying to work on my communication style with a colleague that maybe I don't get along so well, and we always seem to sort of end up in a conflict situation. So I'm trying a different style. How did that go? Did that work? Did it, you know, what did you learn from the interaction? And then as a manager as well, how do you provide coaching, resources, support as part of the person's development? And then the third conversation for me really is around career. And we talked a little bit about it earlier, right? How can you help people explore what is their career ambition? Where do they want to go? Where do they see themselves in 12 months, in 3 years? How can you encourage them to own that journey? So if that's where you want to go, how do we sort of build a roadmap to get you there? But it's not your job as the line manager necessarily to make sure that they get the skills, or to, you know, to build the right networks or relationship. So really, how do you encourage ownership for that career journey, but then at the same time provide support, guidance, resources for them to get there, and visibility. I think that's the other really big role. So we talked earlier about what does a career mean, and what's possible within our organization. So when we talk about career, right, we might have a really flat structure. So if you want to go to the next level, actually, maybe there's only a very limited number of roles, and, you know, maybe none of these roles are going to be available. And so it's managing expectations, being transparent, showing the options, and enabling. So circling back to a little bit to where we started at the beginning, I really think that engagement is critical for any organization, but I do think specifically in the nonprofit sector, it's even more important. Why is that? I think a lot of times it's not just because we have teams and staff and employees who we look after, but we also a lot of times, I know not every nonprofit, but a lot of times we also have volunteers. We have people who give their free time for free to help our cause and move things forward. So I think on the one side, a lot of big corporates can get away with it because maybe they're paying people enough to have an incentive to stay. But if money isn't going to be a differentiator, then I think the engagement piece, the sense of belonging, is going to be a lot more critical, and for us to really think about that. And then, of course, on the volunteer side, if people don't feel engaged, able to contribute value, they just don't show up the next time. And I've seen that happen plenty of times, where we just take for granted that people join with energy and enthusiasm and passion for our cause and our goals. But if we don't give them the right support and the resources, or we don't give them the recognition, they just won't turn up again. They'll find somewhere else. And a lot of times, research shows that once volunteers have actually walked away from one volunteering role, they're less likely to do it for another organization. So it's not just an impact on your own organization, but actually on the whole nonprofit sector. And then I think the other thing for me is about walking the talk. And again, there's so many organizations out there with very different purposes, but I've seen organizations where they're all about the different elements that form engagement with the communities that they serve, but then forget to do that internally with their own people. And it creates a real mismatch. And I think it hurts the credibility of the organization as well in the long run. So it's not just about driving development and growth and learning and helping people to unlock their potential and all these sorts of things with the communities we serve. But it really starts at home with our own staff, with our own volunteers, and our own organization. All right. So that was sort of the formal piece that I wanted to share. What I would love to give you is maybe a couple of minutes to just sort of digest. I know I've been doing a lot of talking, but what's one action that you feel like you're taking away from today? Was one thing that stood out for you, or something that you can take back to your teams? We can do it in chat if you wanna share in chat, or if you wanna come off mute as well. Happy to do that.
And have fairly recently come to the not-for-profit. And one of the issues that I have dealt with recently, not in this organization, in my past organization, is people who feel so engaged, but they haven't got the professional skills that are required. And then that's really difficult, because they have the commitment and they want to be part of the organization, but at the same time we need to get results, and we need professional people to work in a professional way. Have you got any advice on those kind of situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really, and it's interesting, because I've seen the thing, for me, I've seen that stand out a lot around the performance piece, where we're all so excited by this shared mission and the purpose, and we're so grateful that we're all doing this together, that we actually shy away from having tough conversations around performance or holding people to account, right? So I think my advice on that would be really around contracting. So I think it comes back to, let me go back to the slide, is what does great performance look like? What are the skills, but also the other expectations that we have? And that could be, what does showing up professionally mean, right? How do we want to go in front of, how do we want to look or show up in front of funders or stakeholders, or whoever it is? So I think one is clearly articulating, what does that look like? Because what professional looks like to you may be different than what it looks like to me. So I think being quite specific around that, contracting around that, making sure that we have a good shared understanding. And then also, and I guess this comes with the sort of the feedback piece. I don't know if you've used the SBI feedback. So it's a feedback framework around situation, behavior, and impact. So a lot of times when we deliver feedback, it can become quite personal quite quickly. So if we use the SBI feedback, it's about being really clear around, okay, very specific, what was the situation? So last week, when you gave that presentation to this group of people, what was the behavior? So outlining the behavior that you observed. I noticed that you, I don't know, whatever your example is, fill in, but the behavior that you noticed, and explaining the behavior without judging it. So you're not qualifying whether it was good or bad, but to then say, this is the behavior I noticed, and this is the impact that I had. So it could be very, I don't know, something like, when you gave this presentation, I noticed that you were sitting down quite low in your chair during the presentation that you were giving. And the impact that I noticed was that, the other people in the room weren't really listening. They weren't necessarily, I don't know, they weren't listening, they weren't engaging with the topic, whatever it is, right? So you're not giving sort of, you're not passing judgment, but you're sharing more what you've noticed, and you're keeping it more to facts, and you can then have a conversation, say, or what the impact was on you, right? And while my intention might have been a very different one, I can't argue with whether that was the impact on you or not, right? It's very personal, and we perceive things. So using a framework, and I can share that as a follow-up through Anna, maybe with the feedback model with some examples. But taking sort of the emotion out of these conversations and keeping it more to the facts, and then looking at, okay, well, how did you perceive it? How did you feel it went? What could we do differently going forward? I think would be sort of two things. I don't know if that's helpful.
But when I've had this issue in the past, it's with very senior people in the organisation, and they've been there for a long time, and then I come in with my commercial management. Anyway, but yes, thank you. That's very useful, and I'd love to see that document or that summary.
Sure, yeah, I can share that.
Thank you, Christina.
Kateri, you've got a question.
Yeah. So thank you, Christina, and it is a little bit to add on, I guess, to Anne's question as well. So just a little bit of context. I have been working in the NGO world for almost 10 years now, just running operations and so. And it's just my perception that sometimes, like, the mindset that it's part of the NGO world is that even though we all have this passion that we want to change the world, and so we sometimes in the NGO world, we don't fully understand that this is also a business that you need to run, right?
Yeah.
And this is where it gets tricky. So my questions is in terms of like change management, and I'm really interested in something like that. When you want to create habits, right, within the organization, so many times you get to encounter resistance. So do you have any sort of just advice around that? Because in my experience, that gets to happen all the time. Like, even when you talk about operations and you want to create processes and guidelines and procedures, and so when you want to introduce that to your team, there's a lot of resistance all the time. And also because of this mindset of not fully understanding that this is a business as well. So yeah, any sort of tip or advice would be really useful.
Yeah. One of my resistance management, one of my favorite topics. I think one is, as you're embarking on the change, how can you start to, one I think is really important to communicate the why. And what's in it for people, right? So, and not necessarily, you can do the what's in it for the organization, but what's in it actually for the people who are going to have to work with that new process or under, different conditions or whatever it is. So being clear about the why and the benefits. And then the other thing I always feel quite strongly about is how do you make these people part of the change? How do you engage them quite early in the process so you can start to create some joint ownership for this, right? So I think what people hate are surprises. And if they're just being presented with, well, actually tomorrow, we're not going to do it like this, we're going to do it like that. And that's the mandate. You'll have a team who might have pain points or inefficiencies because of the current ways of working. Why not use their knowledge and their understanding of the work that they do to create a more efficient, maybe a better way of working or process? So that way you're creating ownership and a stake, you give them a stake in the solution. And we tend to not be quite so resistant to stuff that we've created ourselves. But I think communicating with people from early on, I think is really important, right? So they're not just being presented with here's the final solution, but bringing people along on the journey, depending on how big the change is, right? It doesn't have to be this massive communication campaign, but just being really clear with people about why are we changing, what's the impact on you, what does good look like, and then making sure that as you're introducing the new process or the system, you know, are you enabling them to do the job well? So do they have the skills, the training that they need, the support to get it started? And then the other piece, I think that's on a more ongoing basis as well, is how do you drive the right reinforcement? So if you've got people on your team who are the early adopters, how can you say, oh, you know, fantastic, Tom's actually used the new process and has done it, and how do you start to sort of share some of that back, so people are saying, oh, well, actually working with the new way of working is being recognized, and you know, he's getting good feedback on that, and all these sorts of things, and so thinking about what are ways beyond just recognition, but what are other ways in which I can make sure we're reinforcing the new behaviors. All right, other thoughts, questions, any idea on actions or something that you're looking?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we were talking with Nicole right now because we feel like we have everything to get done, but at the same time we have now actual tools to start a path and to reach these places that we haven't been before. So these have been really, really useful. I think we may watch this session again when it's uploaded. And I just wanted to thank you, Christina.
No, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So there, in terms of, so I mean, we started off with, you know, at the heart of every organization are people. So I think my encouragement to you is really put people at the heart of your organization. And sometimes it's just the small conversations, the small things. It doesn't mean change everything that you're doing today, but what's one small step that you can take to really increase somebody's engagement can make a huge difference. So I want to say really big thank you. My contact details are here and we'll share them. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'll follow up with the SBI feedback and some of these things as well. There is in the back of the deck also some stuff around some research I did a while ago on different articles around specifically managing a volunteer workforce, some of the things that help specifically in a volunteer setting. So I'll share these out. I didn't want to sort of go into detail, but again, for those of you who work with volunteers, this might be interesting, and I've included that in the book.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christina. It was really nice, very deep and very comprehensive and very wholesome presentation, like from different dimensions. Absolutely agree with other participants that it is we're going to watch and rewatch. That's for sure. There are lots of food for reflection as well. Definitely, talent management and performance. It's all we all have plenty of questions, but it's not something we can cover in one session. And of course, please feel free to approach Christina for individual sessions. And on this note, I would just thank you, Christina, for her really valuable contribution. Yeah, Anna is also saying that that was great. I think we all were quite appreciative, and we will be continuing collaborating with Christina. And so thank you everyone for your participation, for your questions, and for your contributions. Thank you as well to Patricia for her interpretation, and wishing everybody a nice continuation of the day. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.